History loves generals, maps, speeches, and dramatic horse poses. But this video is not about those guys. This is about the moments when one person looked at an army, a bridge, a tank, a bunker, or basic survival instincts and said, "Yeah, I can probably handle that." Some won with bullets, some with knives, some with pure bluff, and one didn't even carry a weapon. These are the most badass one-man army moments in history. 1. Audie Murphy didn't just become the most decorated American soldier of World War II. He became the kind of soldier whose Medal of Honor citation sounds like a rejected action movie for being too much. In January 1945, his unit was being overrun by German infantry and tanks. So Murphy did the responsible thing and ordered his men to fall back. Then he did the completely irresponsible thing and stayed behind. He climbed onto a burning, abandoned M10 tank destroyer packed with fuel and ammunition, which is military language for this thing is now a giant metal bomb with seating. Wounded, exposed, and sitting on a vehicle that could explode at any second, he used its .50 caliber machine gun to hold off the German attack for nearly an hour. When the ammunition ran out, he simply walked back, organized a counterattack, and continued the fight. 2. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was not just a sniper. She was the reason German soldiers on the Eastern Front probably started treating every tree, snowbank, and suspiciously quiet patch of dirt as a personal threat. Nicknamed Lady Death, Pavlichenko was credited with 309 confirmed kills in less than a year of combat, including 36 enemy snipers. That means she wasn't just hunting soldiers, she was hunting the people whose job was to hunt people like her. That is not a duel. That is professional bullying with a rifle. German forces reportedly tried to target her specifically and even used loudspeakers to tempt her into switching sides because apparently their backup plan was, maybe death accepts job offers. She didn't. Pavlichenko became more than a soldier. She was a one-woman psychological weapon. Her actual presence was dangerous, but her possible presence was almost as bad. If someone whispered she might be nearby, an entire section of the front could suddenly rediscover the joy of keeping its head down. 3. During the siege of Corioli, the Roman assault had gone badly. The army had been pushed back from the gates, and the whole operation was starting to look like one of those heroic plans that ends with everyone pretending they were just testing the defenses. But Caius Marcius, later known as Coriolanus, saw the retreat and apparently took it personally. While the Romans were falling back, he charged forward alone and fought his way through the city gates before they could be closed. Once inside, he did not hide, wait for backup, or ask whether anyone had brought a sensible plan. According to the story, he attacked defenders, caused fires, and created so much chaos that the city's defense turned into a panic rehearsal. The Romans outside rallied and stormed the gates while the enemy was trying to understand why one furious Roman had already started the invasion from the inside. Coriolanus did not lead the charge. He looked at the charge, fired everyone else, and became the charge himself. 4. British Commando. Tommy McPherson proved that sometimes the deadliest weapon in war is not artillery, tanks, or air support. Sometimes it is one man in a kilt bluffing with the confidence of a person who has never once doubted himself in a mirror. After escaping a prisoner of war camp in Italy, McPherson reportedly approached German forces and told them they were surrounded by a massive Allied force. If they refused to surrender, he warned, he would call in artillery and wipe them out. This was a bold claim, mainly because there was no massive Allied force and no artillery waiting behind him. There was just Tommy, a kilt, and enough audacity to make reality hesitate. The Germans believed him, which is understandable, because nobody calmly threatens an armored formation unless he either has backup or is mentally licensed to operate heavy confidence. According to the famous account, they surrendered. McPherson did not defeat them with firepower. He defeated them with posture, timing, and terrifying confidence. 5. World War II ended in 1945, a fact accepted by historians, governments, and almost everyone who was not Hiroo Onoda. A Japanese intelligence officer stationed on Lubang Island in the Philippines, Onoda had been ordered to continue fighting and never surrender. He took those orders with the seriousness of a man who considered updating the mission a personal insult. When leaflets announced Japan's surrender, he dismissed them as enemy propaganda. When locals tried to convince him the war was over, he assumed it was another trick. So while the world rebuilt cities, invented new music, started new politics, and generally moved on, Onoda continued his private war for 29 years. He hid in the jungle, gathered intelligence, and carried out raids for an empire that no longer existed in the way he imagined. He finally surrendered in 1974, only after his former commanding officer was brought in to officially relieve him of duty. This was not just loyalty. This was one man declaring war on calendars, newspapers, and the entire concept of "bro, it's over." 6. Banbagta Gurung was a Gurkha, which already means the enemy should have read the warning label. During fighting in Burma, his company was pinned down by 5 Japanese bunkers. 5 fortified positions is normally a job for coordination, support fire, and a group of officers pointing at maps while using words like flanking. Gurung apparently saw 5 bunkers and interpreted them as a to-do list. He rushed forward alone, threw grenades into the first bunker, then attacked the second with his bayonet. At the third, he kicked in the entrance and shot the soldiers inside. Then he kept going, using his rifle and kukri to deal with the remaining positions. In a matter of minutes, he had cleared 5 bunkers almost single-handedly. That is less infantry assault and more one-man technical support for battlefield problems. Bunker 1, resolved. Bunker 2, permanently resolved. Bunkers 3 to 5. Please leave a review. He did not just fight through a defensive line. He processed it like paperwork. 7. Bajiprabhu Deshpande was given the kind of mission that comes with heroic music and terrible survival statistics. His king, Shivaji, needed time to escape a siege, and Deshpande had to hold a mountain pass with a small force against a vastly larger enemy army. The job was simple in the most horrifying way possible. Stand here, don't break, and keep thousands of enemies busy until a cannon signal confirms the king is safe. So Deshpande fought. For hours, he and his men held the pass like a wall made of steel, sweat, and extremely poor odds. He was wounded repeatedly, but according to tradition, he refused to collapse until he heard the signal. His body was basically sending urgent messages saying, "Please stop being alive this aggressively," and he ignored them. Only when the cannon finally echoed through the valley did he allow himself to fall. Bajiprabhu Deshpande put death on hold, finished the assignment, and only then accepted the meeting. 8. In the early Roman Republic, an Etruscan army threatened to cross the only bridge into Rome. If they made it across, the city was in serious trouble. Roman soldiers began retreating, which is a very normal response to seeing an army approaching and realizing you are not emotionally prepared for this. But Horatius Cocles turned around. With 2 comrades, he held the narrow entrance to the bridge while the Romans behind him destroyed it. Soon, his companions withdrew, leaving Horatius alone against an entire army. The bridge was narrow, so he turned it into a funnel of regret. The enemy could not use their numbers properly, and Horatius held long enough for the bridge to collapse behind him. Then, instead of surrendering, he jumped into the Tiber in full armor and swam back to safety. That is the sort of detail that makes Roman legend sound like propaganda written by someone who hated subtlety. Horatius was not just guarding a bridge. For a few crucial minutes, he was Rome's password protection system. 9. During the Winter War, Soviet soldiers had a nightmare in white camouflage. His name was Simo Häyhä, but they called him the White Death, which is a nickname that immediately tells you diplomacy has left the room. Häyhä was a Finnish farmer who became the deadliest sniper in history, hunting in freezing forests where the temperature could drop to brutal levels and the snow itself seemed to be on Finland's side. What made him even more terrifying was that he used iron sights instead of a telescopic scope. Not because he forgot to equip better gear, but because scopes could fog up, catch the sun, or force his head higher. Häyhä preferred to stay low, silent, and extremely bad for Soviet morale. In about 100 days, he was credited with more than 500 kills. The Soviets sent counter-snipers and task forces to eliminate him, which mostly meant sending men into the forest and hoping the forest was in a generous mood. It was not. 10. During the Kargil War, Indian soldiers had to capture a key enemy-held peak by climbing a near-vertical ice wall under heavy fire. This already sounds less like a military operation and more like a mountain looked at the army and said, "Prove it." Yogendra Singh Yadav was part of the assault team leading the climb. Enemy fire tore into the group, killing men and badly wounding Yadav. Some accounts describe him being hit again and again, the kind of damage where any reasonable body would file for emergency shutdown. Yadav kept climbing. Gravity objected, bullets objected, pain objected. He ignored the committee. Reaching the top, he crawled toward an enemy bunker, threw a grenade inside, and helped create the opening his platoon needed to continue the assault. He was wounded, exhausted, and still somehow more useful than most people are on their best day. Yadav did not just climb a mountain, he climbed through the part of the story where normal humans become casualties and turned it into a victory scene. 11. The Battle of Chosin Reservoir was fought in freezing Korean winter conditions so brutal that even the weather seemed to be committing war crimes. In the middle of this, Marine Private Hector Caffarata Jr. found himself defending part of the line almost alone after his fire team had been wiped out. Chinese forces attacked again and again, and Caffarata had to make one man look like a full squad. So he moved between positions, fired his rifle, threw grenades, and created the illusion that the defense was much bigger than it was. When enemy grenades landed near him, he picked them up and threw them back, again and again. His hands were badly burned, but he kept returning explosives like an angry postal worker from hell. For hours, he held the line through sheer refusal to stop. The enemy was not fighting a squad. They were fighting one exhausted Marine running a one-man grenade exchange program. Receive, reject, return to sender. 12. Henry Johnson of the Harlem Hellfighters was on sentry duty in World War I when a German raiding party attacked his position. There were at least 24 of them, which is already an unfair number unless you are Henry Johnson, in which case it becomes a scheduling issue. Johnson fought with his rifle until it was empty. He was shot, wounded, and knocked down. Then the Germans tried to drag away his wounded comrade, Needham Roberts. That was their mistake. Johnson got back up, pulled out a bolo knife, and turned the raid into a close-quarters nightmare. He slashed, stabbed, and fought with such ferocity that the Germans were forced to retreat. By the end, he had suffered 21 wounds. Most people run out of bullets and consider the fight over. Johnson ran out of bullets and simply switched to Plan B, make everyone nearby regret coming to work. He saved his comrade and proved that sometimes the most dangerous part of a soldier is what happens after the rifle is empty. 13. Lakhiman Gurung was alone in a trench when Japanese troops launched a heavy attack and began throwing grenades into his position. He threw the first one back, then the second. The third exploded in his right hand, blowing it off and badly wounding his face and body. For a normal human, this is where the story ends. For Gurung, it was apparently where he changed hands. He moved his rifle to his left hand and kept firing. For the next several hours, he held the trench against repeated attacks. Imagine being one of the attackers and realizing that even after you have literally blown off the man's hand, the position is still not available. When the attack ended, dozens of enemy soldiers lay dead in front of the trench. Gurung had lost his right hand, but not the fight, not the position, and absolutely not his attitude. The enemy removed one hand, so he continued the conversation with the other. 14. During the Malayan emergency, Constable Hassan Chua was stationed at a remote police jungle fort when it came under attack by a much larger communist guerrilla force. Remote jungle stations were already not famous for luxury, but this one suddenly became the center of a very serious problem. Hassan was the only man who made it to the station's Bren light machine gun. Once he got there, the whole defense seemed to center on him. Outnumbered and under pressure, he poured fire into the attackers, pinning them down and stopping them from overrunning the post. For hours, he held firm while waves of attackers tried to break through. One policeman became the main reason the fort did not fall. Imagine being part of the attacking force and realizing your entire plan is being ruined by one constable with a machine gun and a work ethic that should probably be illegal. Hassan Chua did not just defend a post, he became the post's immune system. 15. Desmond Doss went to war without a weapon. As a conscientious objector, he refused to carry a rifle, which sounds like a disadvantage until you realize he had courage stored in quantities that should require a license. At Hacksaw Ridge on Okinawa, his unit was forced to retreat under brutal enemy fire. Doss stayed behind, alone, unarmed, surrounded by danger. For hours, he searched for wounded men, treated them, dragged them to the cliff edge, and lowered them down by rope. Then he went back for another, and another, and another. Each time he prayed, "Lord, please help me get one more." By the end, he had saved 75 men. Doss was not a one-man army because he destroyed the enemy. He was a one-man army because he fought death directly and kept stealing its paperwork. On a battlefield obsessed with killing, he became legendary for saving. 16. Major Robert Kane fought German tanks during Operation Market Garden, which is already a terrifying sentence. Tanks are giant metal boxes designed to remind infantry that humans are inconveniently soft. Kane, however, seemed to take enemy armor personally. Armed with a PIAT, a spring-loaded British anti-tank weapon that looked like it was built by someone who wanted both the tank and the user to suffer, he went hunting. He destroyed or disabled several tanks, including a Tiger. A Tiger tank was not just a vehicle. It was a moving steel argument. Kane still argued back. At one point, a shell blast temporarily blinded him, and machine gun fire damaged his hearing. He refused evacuation and returned to the fight when he could see again. Most people see a tank and look for cover. Robert Kane saw a tank and looked for an angle. He was a one-man anti-tank department with terrible customer reviews from German crews. 17. Tibor. Ted Rubin had already survived the Mauthausen concentration camp before he ever fought in Korea, which means he had endured horror long before the army handed him a rifle. During the Korean War, his unit was in danger of being overwhelmed and had to withdraw. Rubin was ordered to stay behind and cover the retreat. That sounds official and tidy, but in practice it meant stay alone on a hill while the enemy tries very hard to erase you. Rubin held the position for nearly 24 hours against repeated attacks. His resistance caused enough delay and confusion for his regiment to escape encirclement. The enemy reportedly believed they were facing a larger force, not one unbelievably stubborn man who had already survived the worst of humanity and was not impressed by another nightmare. Rubin turned himself into a roadblock with a rifle and a personal grudge against defeat. 18. John Basilone became a Marine Corps legend on Guadalcanal because he treated impossible odds like an inconvenience with bad manners. During a massive Japanese assault, he commanded machine gun sections defending a critical line. For 3 days and nights, the attacks kept coming. 3 days and nights is not a battle. It is a horrible subscription service that refuses to cancel. When one gun crew was wiped out, Basilone moved another gun into position himself and kept firing. When ammunition ran low, he crossed dangerous ground to bring more back. He repaired weapons, shifted positions, fired, carried, and refused to let the defense collapse. At one point, he was helping hold off waves of attackers with a machine gun and a pistol. Basilone was not technically alone, but his actions made him feel like an army inside the army. The line held because he kept dragging it back from disaster every time disaster got comfortable. 19. Blackbeard's final fight was exactly as dramatic as you would expect from a man who reportedly put slow-burning fuses in his beard because normal intimidation was apparently too subtle. Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, was cornered by Royal Navy forces in 1718. When his ship was boarded, he fought at close range against trained sailors. Accounts say he was shot multiple times and suffered many sword wounds before finally dying. In his duel with Lieutenant Robert Maynard, Blackbeard's sword reportedly broke, but he kept fighting anyway because even his weapon quitting did not convince him to stop. It took repeated wounds and a final attack from behind to bring him down. Blackbeard did not go quietly, neatly, or with any concern for making the Navy's paperwork simple. His final stand was less death of a pirate and more historical explosion-wearing boots. 20. Marcos of the Nesiots sounds like a man who looked at naval warfare and thought, "What if the enemy has a fleet but I have absolutely no chill?" According to dramatic Byzantine accounts, he took a single warship and attacked an Egyptian fleet. One ship against a fleet is usually not strategy. It is a maritime intrusive thought. But Marcos had Greek fire, the terrifying incendiary weapon that could burn on water. In an age when ships were wooden and fire safety was mostly a prayer, that mattered. He reportedly sailed into the enemy formation and unleashed liquid flame, causing panic and chaos. The goal was not necessarily to sink every ship. The goal was to make the enemy believe they were facing a floating demon with excellent range. According to the story, the commanders lost their nerve and withdrew. Marcos proved that numbers are important, but so is being the only lunatic at sea with ancient napalm. 21. Zhuge Liang's empty fort strategy is one of the greatest stories of psychological warfare, even if it lives partly in the realm of legend. As the tale goes, he found himself in a nearly undefended fortress while a huge enemy army approached. Instead of closing the gates and preparing for a heroic disaster, he did the most suspiciously calm thing possible. He opened the gates, had people sweep outside, climbed above the entrance, and casually played his lute. The enemy commander saw the scene and thought, "Nobody acts this relaxed unless this is a trap." Which, to be fair, is a reasonable conclusion. If you arrive with an army and the guy inside responds with light music and public cleaning, something is deeply wrong. So the commander retreated. Zhuge Liang defeated a massive force not with arrows or cavalry, but with confidence so powerful that the enemy's imagination did the fighting for him. This was not a battle. It was a vibe check, and the army failed. 22. At the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066, legend says one enormous Viking warrior held a narrow bridge against the English army. The English needed to cross. The Viking disagreed. Armed with a huge axe, he supposedly cut down anyone who tried to pass, turning the bridge into his personal office. The English had the numbers, but numbers are less useful when the battlefield is one narrow bridge and the man blocking it has decided to become a problem for architecture. He reportedly killed around 40 men before they found a workaround. And by workaround, we mean one of the most humiliating boss fight strategies in medieval legend. Someone floated under the bridge in a barrel or boat and speared him from below. They could not beat him face to face, so they attacked from underneath the map. Whether every detail is literal history or not, the image is perfect. One furious Viking turning a bridge into a human meat grinder. 23. Benkei, the legendary Japanese warrior monk, is what happens when loyalty becomes physically terrifying. He served Minamoto no Yoshitsune, and his final stand is one of Japan's most famous warrior legends. Cornered by enemies, Benkei stood guard to protect his lord. According to the stories, he fought off attacker after attacker with monstrous strength, preventing anyone from passing. Eventually, the enemy decided that approaching him directly was a terrible career move, so they shot him from a distance with arrows. Many arrows. Enough arrows that most men would fall and become extremely horizontal. Benkei did not. He died standing upright, still blocking the way. The enemy was reportedly afraid to approach until they realized he was already dead. That is commitment. Most people die and stop working. Benkei died and continued guarding the entrance through posture alone. 24. Charles Commando. Kelly earned his Medal of Honor in Italy by becoming a one-man weapons cabinet with anger issues. His position was under heavy German attack, ammunition was running low, and the situation was getting desperate. Kelly did not retreat. He improvised. For hours, he moved through fire, grabbing whatever weapons he could find: rifles, BARs, Tommy guns, and even mortar rounds, which he used like oversized grenades. If it could shoot, explode, or be introduced violently to the enemy, Kelly was interested. Every time the Germans pushed forward, he appeared with some new tool of regret. He was not defending one position from one spot. He was moving through the chaos like a heavily armed raccoon in a supply depot. The Germans thought they were attacking a defended building. In reality, they were attacking one furious man who had become the entire lost and found department for battlefield weapons. 25. Alvin C. York was a deeply religious man from Tennessee who initially struggled with the idea of fighting in war. But during the Meuse-Argonne offensive, his patrol was pinned down by German machine guns, and many men around him were killed or wounded. York moved into position and began picking off the German gunners with terrifying calm. When German soldiers charged him, he shot them too. A German officer reportedly fired at York with a pistol and missed, which was unfortunate for him, because York did not miss back. Eventually, the surviving Germans surrendered. York and the remaining Americans brought in 132 prisoners. That is not just winning a firefight. That is accidentally organizing a very unhappy German field trip. Most soldiers are lucky to survive a machine gun ambush. York survived it, broke it, and returned with enough prisoners to make everyone ask whether he had captured a small army or started collecting them. 26. Guy Gabaldon fought at Saipan, but his most famous weapon was not a rifle. It was language. Having grown up around Japanese-American friends in Los Angeles, he knew enough Japanese to speak to soldiers and civilians hiding in caves and bunkers. Instead of always attacking these positions directly, Gabaldon would sometimes approach alone, even unarmed, and talk. This was insanely dangerous. One frightened soldier could have shot him instantly. But Gabaldon told them the battle was lost, promised they would not be harmed, and offered them a way to survive. Again and again, it worked. He was credited with persuading more than 1,000 people to surrender and earned the nickname the Pied Piper of Saipan. Gabaldon proved that sometimes the most powerful move is walking forward empty-handed and convincing death to take a break. 27. Thomas Alfred Todger Jones fought in World War I, where trench warfare usually meant mud, wire, artillery, and tiny advances paid for with terrible casualties. During one action, a German machine gun was cutting down his comrades. Waiting for orders might have been reasonable. Jones chose the less reasonable but more legendary option. He went alone. He crawled out, made his way through barbed wire, and attacked the machine gun position. He shot one gunner, bayoneted another, and forced the rest to surrender. Then he noticed more Germans coming out of a dugout and forced them to surrender too. By the time he was done, he had captured more than 100 enemy soldiers. That is not how trench warfare was supposed to work. You were supposed to gain a few yards, not go outside and return with a bulk prisoner delivery. Jones turned no man's land into his personal checkout lane. 28. Daniel Inouye later became a U.S. Senator, but before that, he had one of the most unbelievable combat stories of World War II. During an assault on a ridge in Italy, he attacked German machine gun positions and kept advancing even after being shot in the stomach. Then, as he prepared to throw a grenade at another bunker, a German rifle grenade struck his right arm, nearly severing it. His damaged hand was still holding a live grenade. This is one of the worst possible combinations: extreme pain plus a timer. Inouye used his left hand to pry the live grenade out of his ruined right hand and threw it into the enemy position, destroying it. Then he kept giving orders until the objective was taken. Only after the battle was won did he allow himself to be evacuated. Inouye had his arm nearly blown off and still completed the delivery. 29. When Emperor Galba was attacked by assassins, the Praetorian Guard delivered one of history's least impressive performances in personal security. Their job was to protect the emperor. Most of them decided this was a flexible suggestion, but one man stayed. Centurion Sempronius Densus. Surrounded by armed killers and facing hopeless odds, Densus drew his sword and stood between them and Galba. He denounced the assassins as traitors and fought alone to delay them. It did not save the emperor, and Densus was killed. But that is why the story matters. He was not fighting because victory was likely. He was fighting because duty still meant something, even when everyone else had found a convenient exit. In a scene full of betrayal, cowardice, and political murder, Densus became the last honest wall in Rome. He did not win, but he made sure history knew who had actually done his job. 30. Canadian soldier Leo Major had one working eye and enough nerve for an entire battalion. During the liberation of the Netherlands, he and another soldier were sent to scout the city of Zwolle. Scouting usually means observe, report, and avoid doing anything too dramatic. When Major's friend was killed by German fire, he skipped that part. Instead of retreating, he decided to convince the German garrison that a full Canadian assault was underway. Alone, he moved through the city at night, firing from different positions, throwing grenades, capturing soldiers, and creating as much chaos as possible. The Germans heard gunfire and explosions from multiple directions and believed a major attack had begun. In reality, it was one extremely angry Canadian treating reconnaissance like a solo campaign mission. By morning, the Germans had withdrawn, and Zwolle was effectively liberated. Leo Major did not just scout the city. He looked at a city of 50,000 people and somehow clicked single player. 31. Ammar ibn Yasir was over 90 years old at the Battle of Siffin, which is an age when most people deserve cushions, soup, and absolutely no cavalry charges. Ammar had other plans. A close companion of the Prophet Muhammad, he was already a deeply respected figure, and his presence on the battlefield carried enormous meaning. But according to accounts, he was not merely sitting in the back offering motivational speeches like a medieval life coach. He fought with remarkable energy despite his age, inspiring those around him. It is difficult to complain about being tired when a man old enough to have memories older than your family tree is still in battle. Ammar became living proof that courage does not expire. His body was old, but his conviction apparently refused to read the birth certificate. He was not badass because he was young and invincible. He was badass because, at over 90, he still showed up where younger men were afraid to stand. 32. Roman centurions were famous for being tough, but Sceva seems to have treated toughness as a starting point, not a goal. During Caesar's civil war, he defended the gate of a fort while enemy forces focused their attack on his position. The fighting became so intense that his shield was reportedly pierced by around 120 missiles. Sceva kept going. He was wounded in the eye, shoulder, and thigh, yet continued to hold the position. Imagine being one of the attackers and realizing the man at the gate is slowly being converted into a human pincushion, but still refuses to fall down. According to Caesar's account, Sceva fought with such ferocity that the enemy assault lost momentum. Eventually, he collapsed from wounds and exhaustion, but the fort had held. Caesar rewarded him heavily, and the story became legend. Sceva began the battle carrying a shield. By the end, the shield had basically retired, and Sceva had become the shield himself. So those were some of history's wildest one-man army moments. But now the comment section has a job. Who did we criminally leave out? And don't just drop a famous name and run. Make the case. Who belongs here? Who was overrated? And who could solo half this list? Put your best pick in the comments. And if you enjoyed watching history turn into a solo campaign mission, hit like, subscribe, and stick around.